It's been quite a quiet year for console releases. I mean, compared to last year, let's face it. So when something genuinely impressive like the BatleXP G350 turns up, it's a bit of a shock. This is Anbernic's budget effort, essentially their 35XX Pro, but with all the bells and whistles taken out. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no Bluetooth, there's no income tax, no VAT. It's aimed at a budget-conscious gamer, the sort of people who consider buying the name brand biscuits a major financial commitment. But the build quality is genuinely impressive, pretty much identical to the more expensive version, and you don't miss the extra bells and whistles, especially when you're playing 40-year-old games that could comfortably run on my Auntie Jean's hearing aids. In fact, it's so good for the money, I'm always worried that it was priced wrong and someone's going to knock on my door asking for it back. Like all budget gaming devices, though, this comes with custom firmware. And like all out-of-the-box custom firmware, this is lackluster. I'm being very polite there. So in this video, I'm testing every firmware option to see which ones are great and which ones will make you pull your hair out, which proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that I know what I'm saying, because I really have done my work. All right, let's just start by taking a look at why we aren't sticking with what you get in the box. The stock firmware comes labeled BatleXP version 1.0 because apparently spelling battle correctly was too many letters to fit on the Dynamo label maker or something. It comes with what can generously be described as a curated ROM collection. And by curated, I really mean whatever fell off the back of a lorry. Half the ROMs are bad dumps that don't save properly, so you can spend 3 hours perfecting a speed run only to discover that your progress has evaporated. The file naming is completely chaotic. There's no alphabetical order, just pure anarchy. And the built-in scraper for downloading artwork, even with a Wi-Fi dongle plugged in, it still crashes repeatedly. I've seen Windows ME with more stability than this. The whole system is so fundamentally broken that the first thing every setup guide tells you to do is bin the SD card and start again. At this point, you have to wonder if their quality control department is just a bloke called Dave who nods approvingly at anything that doesn't immediately catch fire. So I went out and I got a brand new integral SD card, which we're going to be using for testing all of the operating systems today. Now, this is only 64GB for testing, but remember, this has 2 micro SD drives, so you could grab a small one for your OS and a bigger one for your games. First up, it's Rocknix, one of the most ambitious firmware options with an impressive feature set. I have heard so many good things about Rocknix. Proper network play, cloud saves, VPN support. Fans of this system act like it's going to mow your lawn, fix your marriage, and solve the national debt crisis. So naturally, I was excited to test it on the G350, even though it's only available through a community fork. Which does sound a bit official, but it really means that it's held together with duct tape and good intentions. The feature set is genuinely brilliant and game compatibility is solid. It handles all of the usual suspects: SNES, NES, Genesis, Harvey Keitel. It's fairly responsive once it gets going, though the boot process moves at the speed of continental drift. But here's where things go spectacularly wrong. I had no audio whatsoever, complete silence. It's a known bug. It's been sitting in their GitHub for months, so don't expect it to be fixed anytime soon. So you've got this fantastic firmware packed with features, and it is useless. A complete deal breaker for me, as I'm sure it would be for a lot of people too. So let's move on to the next one, My Mini UI. And this one is a little bit different because it's not actually a complete firmware. It's a fancy new front end that sits on top of Arc OS. The appeal is obvious. It's fast, clean, and it gets you into games without all of the visual clutter. It's perfect for people who find Emulation Station more frustration station. But installing My Mini UI is where things get complicated. First, you install Arc OS. Then you download specific files, create folders in exactly the right places, run installation script through the command line, copy things to precise locations, execute them in the correct order, sacrifice a small goat to the firmware gods, and finally call forth the great god Cthulhu. Miss one step and you're back to square one. And you've got a rather large cosmic entity that AliExpress won't process a return for. The community support consists entirely of asking questions in Discord channels at ungodly hours, hoping somebody who speaks fluent Linux will take pity on you. Now, I've tried all of the operating systems in this list except for this one because of that installation nightmare. So I started the process and I realized how frustrating it was, and that, if you're just new to this and you're just starting out, you are not going to be able to do it at all. It's just so infuriating. So I can't recommend this setup or the Great God Cthulhu to anybody who values their sanity. Now, you might have heard of JellOS, but before you get excited, it's completely dead. The project was archived in May 2024, which in open source terms means they've taken their ball and they've gone home. It never supported the G350, so that's one less headache to worry about. However, there is Unofficial OS, which is a community-driven fork of the JellOS system. This one actually works on the G350. The installation process requires you to flash the image and then download a special boot.ini file and manually replace the original one. Performance-wise, it's actually pretty solid once you get it running, handles everything you'd expect smoothly, and the emulation station interface feels responsive and polished. One potential issue: some users find their analog sticks don't work correctly out of the box. There is a workaround, but it needs a little bit more fiddling to get it to work, which is one of the reasons that it's not higher on the list. The real kicker, though, is that any time you want to update the system, it overwrites that boot.ini file. So you get to repeat that copying and pasting process all over again. You're basically stuck in this permanent cycle of firmware maintenance. The gaming is great. The housekeeping, well, let's just say it's nothing to get jealous about. Next up is Newly, and this is my favorite operating system. I've got it on all of my anbernic devices, so I was really hoping for great things on this one. On other devices, this is my go-to firmware. It's pretty much perfect. And I know not everybody is its biggest fan, but if you're after that emulation station look, this is simple to install. Everything pretty much works out of the box. In fact, it's so polished it could be mistaken for the Stanley Cup. So I was genuinely excited to find an alpha build for the G350. I got it installed and it works. The interface is clean. Performance is fantastic. It handles everything perfectly. For a moment, I thought I'd found the one. But the audio is so quiet, you get more volume by just shouting out the sound effects yourself, which, for the record, does not improve the Super Mario experience the way I thought it would. It's a single fundamental flaw that ruins an otherwise perfect system. It is, of course, an alpha build, so you have to expect this sort of thing. But since it's still on Firefly and not the new Gladiator build, it does mean that this may not get a proper release anytime soon. Ultimately, this makes this firmware nully and void. Yeah, the jokes aren't going to get any better, I'm afraid. After all that frustration, the missing audio and the risk of summoning cosmic entities, we finally come to one that actually works. Pan4elec is a fork of AmberELEC, but specifically optimized for Panel 4 devices, and there's a build specifically for the G350. The entire philosophy is to be as painless as possible. Installation is refreshingly simple. You flash the image onto the card and it works. There's no replacing special files. There's no chanting ancient incantations. It just does the job. The whole thing is designed to look good and work straight away. It's so well put together that it feels like it was designed by people who've actually met a human being before. The menus are clean. It comes with great themes. The screen overlays are pre-configured to look like classic handhelds, and the performance is excellent. Some people even say it's the best option for Sega Saturn. Of course, I don't think Sega Saturn will run on the G350, but that's beside the point. The trade-off for all of that convenience is loss of control. The developers have essentially curated the entire experience for you, like a museum exhibit, if you will. You can't easily change things. The boot logo, for instance, because that's been carefully chosen. It's now part of the permanent collection. You also can't easily overclock the processor or tweak the system files because those are considered staff-only areas and they don't want the public wandering in and touching the priceless artifacts that they don't understand. But honestly, for a device like this, having a firmware that just works without any faffing about is probably the holy grail. For many, Pan4elec is the one to get. In fact, I was really torn between which one to actually recommend to people, this or the next one, but I'll come to that at the end. The final operating system is Arc OS. This is essentially the kit car of firmwares. It's got the most powerful engine, but it arrives in a box and there's some assembly required. The performance is fantastic, boot time is really quick, and it's widely regarded as the best option for running more demanding systems on cheaper hardware. The installation, however, has a little bit of a personality quirk. You flash the image to a different device, the RG351MP, and then you have to manually swap a couple of special files in the boot partition. First, you need to get the right panel file, and if you forget that, you just get a black screen. But this shouldn't put you off, because actually it's fairly easy to find and download the right one. And then we get to the joystick file, because if you don't replace that one, the firmware thinks the right analog stick has been installed sideways. I'm not joking. Pushing it up makes you look right, and pushing it left makes you look up. Trying to play a game like Ape Escape becomes a surreal nightmare. The reason for this might be a surprise to you. The G350 does have the right analog stick mounted 90 degrees counterclockwise to where it should be. They did that so the stock operating system, the one that's full of bugs and doesn't work properly, could play vertical games. But to be fair, it's really not that good an experience on this console, and you'd be better off looking at something like the Cube XX or the Magic X040 if that's the sort of game you're really into. Okay, so let's be clear, dragging and dropping these two little files fixes this completely. Everything works perfectly after that. So it's the firmware with the highest potential. It does ask you to do a couple of tiny things first, but once it's done, it's running the firmware without any drama. So after all of that, which firmware should you actually install? Honestly, it's a dead heat between two, and it completely depends on what kind of person you are. If you want to turn the G350 on and just have it work perfectly with no fuss whatsoever, then Pan4elec is the clear winner. It's for people who want their gaming handheld to work like any other appliance in their house. Press the on button and it'll do its job. You're not interested in recalibrating the toaster. But if you are interested in recalibrating the toaster, you're the sort of person who sees a perfectly good device and the first thought is, I bet I can get more out of that, then you need Arc OS. It absolutely has the most potential. It's the best performance on tough games, and it's got the most control. So really, it's a tie. And no matter what you choose, if you want to install either of these operating systems onto your G350, why not check out the video here or the video over there?